Hey everybody, welcome back to Contest Prep University. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. I'm going to be in a little bit different spot. Usually I like to stand, but I have a great big post-surgical cast on my foot. And so I'm going to be sitting here for a couple of weeks. Something we might talk about at some point, Adam, talk about injuries and recovery and what to do. But today, you have been very successful right out of the gate with the new fit model category. And just want to kind of go through exactly what that has been looking like. We talked about this, I think it was last fall when the NPC and IFBB announced this new division. And the criteria certainly look very cut and dry, a couple posing differences. Matter of fact, they had selected a prototype bikini competitor from a specific year and said, this is the look we want. Meaning, as we always do, we have simply exceeded the boundaries of all of our previous divisions. So we have to yet create another one just to try and make it more accessible, a little bit more attainable, meaning maybe a little bit less muscle, a little bit less definition, but at least there were very clear definitions on some of those aspects. And I'm interested to see if you think they have stuck to those.
Yeah, I think right now they have stuck to them. When you look at who they use Ashley Kaltwasser as an example, who is like the goat of women's physique sport. She's got more pro wins than anybody, and I think back when I lived in Ohio and she lived in Ohio, she had won three of her Olympiad championships out with a group of a team that was my nemesis, Summers. I mean, I love Summers, but they produced a lot of winners because they had the pull of everyone working with, three-time Miss Olympia at that point. So girls would just naturally go to Summers just because of that, those Olympia titles. So that was kind of cool to see and, see it in person. But as far as the division goes, no one's quite on that level of muscularity yet. But if we look at least meeting the shape and the conditioning aspect, so we're seeing two of those met. And not to, toot my own horn, but my client Emily just really seems to be fitting the standard well. Granted, she is a little bit on the more petite side. But she really does fit that shape. And I think one of my hardest things as a coach is, Emily used to do bikini and we used to come in at around 108 pounds for her, drug-free bikini shows. Well, now we're coming in anywhere between 111 at the leanest and 113.8 at like the highest. So we have kind of found that to be our successful range and our best look, depending on how the GI is functioning. And obviously, we're using the photos, but we're using the weight as a gauge to really kind of hone in on the division.
Well, let's talk about that because I think women with different body types have to approach this from a slightly different angle. I currently have a competitor who is lucky enough to just kind of be a pure mesomorph. I mean, she just has the muscle that could compete in two or three divisions very, very well. So she has the ability to decide how far do I want to diet to meet certain division criteria and therefore give me the best chance in any one of those two or three divisions she chooses. And we're at a place now where, because of the amount of muscle she has, figure is very much on the table, but bikini being just a little bit leaner is something she could do. For fit body, I'm sorry, fit model, they were very clear that we want to soften this just a little bit. And they even went to the degree of saying, maybe a separation here or there in the hamstring area, but definitely no, striated glutes, that sort of thing. So I want to pick your brain a little bit on what you're seeing there, because a lot of women even have a difficult time trying to discern that in their own progress, because how you look statically in a certain pose can translate differently to you being in motion and walking in front of judges, where all of a sudden you see fasciculations and musculature you might not pick up in your own progress photos.
Absolutely. That's a great question. I've had six fit model overalls and they all have different body types between the Emily's won three, and then I've had three other different competitors who have won. When we speak about this, I think of my client Lydia, who has some bigger glutes. She does hold a little bit more body fat back there, but just enough that it almost looks like tissue, like muscle tissue. And you know, we did have to bring her glutes down a little bit, but because she has such great glute development, we had to be careful on not getting her too tight back there because she's one of those few people who could almost, if she had bigger upper body, maybe jump into bikini due to the size of her glutes. So we really had to draw that line. And then on the other end, I have my client Mandy, who has really developed shoulders, holds a lot of her body fat around her glutes, only in her glutes, really tight waist. And with her, you know, we're really dieting her down only for glute tightness. But I think for Mandy, nailing the peak couldn't be more important for any other competitor. For some reason, Mandy seems to store a lot of her peak week glycogen in her glutes, which is a good thing. So, you know, when we're flat and depleted, we're kind of seeing some shading of the glutes. But when we peak, we're able to get a little bit of projection there and get some fullness into the glutes to kind of bring them to the surface. And you know, even as much as we manipulate the peak week, it all comes down to we need eventually an off season to grow so we can make the peak week process easier. But you know, Mandy doesn't have a definitive tie-in back there. But if she develops more, she eventually could. It's just we want to get those glutes big enough. So drawing the line on the glute hamstring tie-in, you definitely don't want to be too hard, but you definitely don't want to be too soft either. And we even had feedback with Emily, like, don't get any leaner. You're nailing it. Like, don't take this any further. Like you're pretty much perfect. But with a new division, I think sometimes they have to be hard on you if you're too hard, because we're really trying to set the example, you know, moving forward on what they want.
Yeah, and for that example, they said, warning your clients, you look great, you just won an overall, do not get any leaner. If she wanted to compete in bikini, you would simply want her to take that extra step, get a little bit leaner, and then even through the peaking process, make sure you err on the side of being fuller. So now she's got those bigger delts again. She's kind of walking away from the new criteria intent, but she has that opportunity, and that's an important part of fitting division criteria. I don't want to sound like you're manipulating the system, but you're using it to your advantage when sometimes it's better to be a little bit over qualified or quote too good for a certain division. And then instead of rolling the dice to try to fit some kind of a magical 1 or 2% best ever, best possible peak, you're almost, oh gosh, I don't want to say dumbing down your physique because that sounds awful, but you're making it easier for yourself where you just don't have to look your ultimate best. I hope that doesn't sound pedantic or like you know, putting certain competitors down. But when you have those abilities, the ability to peak a little bit differently, to die a little bit harder, to be a little softer or fuller or tighter, it's an interesting conundrum to have to try to decide what division you want. And so with these clients, again, we're only in April of this first season with this division. You've already won 6 overalls with clients, and you said they all look a little bit different. So are you finding, just like any division, you still have to be the best looking physique? Here are the narrow windows of these criteria, but we still have a little opportunity to display your best?
Yeah. So for a lot of my clients, they have really good shape. I think that's what's selling this. And you know, they definitely have an hourglass type shape, just good enough glutes, but nothing that stands out as very extreme. maybe Lydia has a little bit bigger glutes and Mandy has a little bit bigger shoulders. But they really do all have different physiques. Kayla is very, very tall and balanced. Maybe just needs a little bit more shoulders to match her glute development. And it's really cool. But I do feel like, you know, it's just a more shapely division to me, and aesthetic. It literally just reminds me of the old times of bikini where it's, you know, you're definitely kicking your butt in the gym, but to me, it just looks like bikini without enhancements, to be quite honest, like what bikini used to be. I hate to call it that, but these girls are pretty and feminine, and I think that that's something that a lot of people want. And I do know some bikini pros, like IFBB pros that I coach, they're pretty and feminine as well. But that has always fit my, you know, kind of how I coach,
Yeah.
I could have probably had hundreds of more bikini pros if I did things just one way. But to me, winning is really giving people what they want and desire at the end of the day, and not ultimately what just makes me look like the best coach in the world at the end of the day, just because I have thousands of pro cards, and I mean, we have had countless pro cards together. I don't even think me and you have kept count anymore after we hit a certain number. But to me, it's the experience, and it's, when clients sign off with me, when that time comes, hey, thanks for everything you did. And I'm glad I was maintaining my health and femininity through this process. And I've now had clients who left years ago who are like, hey, now that we see this new division, it's a direction I would like to go in. I'm coming back and I'm ready to get on stage again. This aligns with me morally.
See, that is something I don't think we even touched on last fall when we started discussing this. And that is in the bikini division, I also have had many clients who made the decision, I just have to do PEDs now to make the pro ranks in advance in the IFBB in bikini. And so I would have a lot of clients who were lifelong drug-free natural competitors. And then it was like, well, Joe, what do you think about just a little Anavar? What about a little more Anavar? What about a little T replacement? What about this? And all of a sudden they're taking those steps and now they're worrying about hormonal masculinization and all of these things that they never did before. It was never even on their radar. Do you think, in the minds of the executives at the NPC and IPB, this was to make it more accessible to women who didn't want to make that decision? Because again, I mean, even all the way back to men's physique and fit body and figure just decades ago, I think that really saved the sport in making physique sport more normalized in terms of what the average person would hope to look like. Do you think that was an intended or an unintended consequence of this new division where more women could just stay drug free and still compete at this highest level?
Yeah, I think it was definitely intended. I mean, they have the natural division now, which is great, the natural shows. And now this is a really cool divide because I currently have a client right now who I'm thinking of having her do bikini, drug free, but then doing open shows as a fit model and shows that aren't tested. And that can be really fun for clients to say, I'm doing both, or, my body type allows me to do really well in drug-free bikini shows, but when I'm maybe at a deficit, I can jump into a division that's a little bit, um, you know, smaller to a degree. And I keep hearing girls say this, I'm going to step down into fit model. Well, don't step down, step up into the division that you think you'll compete best at. So I think now with the division being a little newer, if you're on the border of bikini and fit model, you know, why not try a drug-free show? And if you are drug-free and do bikini and then step into an untested, if you're on that line, you might look a little big in a natural contest up against other girls. And we're still seeing, different judging in different places, but I think the NPC has done a heck of a great job with manicuring this and keeping the judges informed. All the feedback that I've gotten from all the different panels of judges has been very, very concurrent with each other. And that's been really awesome to see. And I think that's one of the benefits of the NPCs. They fly these judges everywhere, they train them, and they're really shaping this division quickly.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm part of an exploratory committee with the WNBF as they've adjusted ownership this year. And one of the things we've talked about in some of our board meetings recently is the fact that the NPC does such a great job of that level of judging standardization. And in the WNBF, they're going to try to model that with a couple of different procedural enhancements. What I'm interested now to be the most practical we can for our audience. um, Obviously, genetics are different. One female can look different at 8% body fat than another. But if you had to guess, and maybe among your women who are already winning, what level of body fat are you really searching for as kind of a bullseye target, and then adjusting for somebody's own genetics?
And that's tough because I'm going to say it's probably somewhere between 12 and 14%, I would guess. Um,
So that is a little bit higher because I've seen bikini competitors getting down to 6 to 8%.
yeah. And you might see that 10. It just kind of depends on how they wear it. And some girls wear, body fat within the muscle tissue a little bit more. Um, And we're seeing it in different countries, and that's cool because we're seeing literally different genetic prototypes. Russia just gave out their first fit model pro card, and Japan just gave out, or Korea gave out another one. So it's been really cool to see it just across the world. And next weekend in Pittsburgh, they give out the first fit model US based pro card, and it's a drug-free pro card as well. So that's cool because it's two firsts. We've never seen it in the US in this category, and this will be the first natural pro card given out for Fit Model as well.
And from an exercise science kinesiology perspective, I know you and I are always going to seek a certain amount of just bodily balance. I don't like to see my bikini competitors or anybody else say, well, we don't train that muscle group at all because it's just not necessary. You don't want to become overdeveloped or too strong on one side of a joint and weak on another, create postural imbalances, joint force imbalances, and that sort of thing. But knowing that there are definite size limitations, are you erring on the side of training some body parts a little bit more? Are you still hitting glutes and delts a little bit harder? Or I guess one of my reasons for asking this is when I look at yoga instructors, or there's a whole crop of new athletes who are just doing a lot of functional mobility, calisthenic body weight type training with tremendous results. I mean, these people aren't even in a traditional gym doing deadlifts and squats, and they have unbelievable physiques that I think could fit in some of these physique sport divisions. So, are you seeing this more accessible in a general conditioned person, or are you still having to really force a lot of hypertrophy in certain body parts?
Yeah, we're still forcing hypertrophy. I still have my girls training shoulders. I think the pro shows in this are going to be a really uh, I think that's going to really guide us just with how far can we take the muscle. And that's going to be interesting. But right now, definitely focusing on balance, growth, and just making it make sense. And I feel like without the enhancements of drugs, it's making it easy for me not to take it too far.
Mhm. So one final way of just closing this out, let's review the division criteria they came out with last year. And that was, very specific in terms of how much definition you see between the hamstrings and the glutes, even verbiage into the striation level of delts and vascularity and so forth. Can you go over exactly what those are?
Yeah, so they don't want like striated delts. They want, they don't really want a necessarily like tie in the glute, even though like you do see a little bit of tie-in, but they're meaning like they just don't want to like boom in your face like bikini. So, you want well-conditioned glutes, but not overly conditioned. We shouldn't see any striations. The look should look attainable for, someone in the audience, like, hey, I want to do that. And that's the whole purpose of this is bringing a look that's great, but not too far and something that looks attainable. And, it is called fit model. You need to look presentable. You minimize the jewelry a little bit on stage. There's no stones on the bikini. So this makes it able so someone could go to Target and get a suit, or you could, you know, get a suit designed by Angel Competition Bikinis and go out there. And that's honestly what people should do. These suit designers have this down to science. You don't want to bank on bringing the wrong suit. But yeah, making sure that you're just not over muscular for the division.
Yeah, I keep coming back to that word of just accessible to the average person who says, I want to look my best, and I now have a shot at a competitive run in a physique sport division that I may not have prior. So congratulations to you, Adam, in six big winners so far already this early. And those of you who are interested in more information on that, obviously you can contact us. But we will be discussing this a little bit more, maybe even this week in our Contest Prep University D1 Club, our private group that meets a couple times a month and of course has access to our staff and everybody. So Adam, again, thanks. And we will see everybody next time in Contest Prep University.